We are all aware of the statistics that say 70% of Black households are without Black fathers. Though that may be true, what we never really discuss is the households that do have Black fathers, or those 70% of Black households that produce sons that one day become fathers. That's what I want to discuss on this podcast that I'm going to entitle The Science of Black Fatherhood, because most of us that are Black fathers didn't have fathers. And what I found out through my journey through fatherhood thus far, fatherhood for Black men, it's harder than it seems because most of us didn't have the example. And as I sit and think and I talk to my children, I often wonder, am I doing it right? Because I'll never really know until they become adults and I see the kind of adults they turn out to be. But right now, I'm really just winging it because the example wasn't set for me. As I sit back and I look at how white fathers parent, how Indian fathers parent, how Hispanic fathers parent, I can't help but look at myself as a father and say, am I doing it the correct way? Because most of them had examples, not all, but most of them had some sort of example on how to be a great father. So as I sit back and I look at myself, I look at my friends, my Black brothers who are fathers, and I observe how we all choose to parent our children, it is evident that we're all doing it differently. And because you don't know whether you're doing it right until you see the kind of young adults they become, it's hard to really nail down the science. I'll say this, man, the pandemic has taught me a lot about who I am, the kind of father I was, the kind of father I wanted to be, and the kind of father I am, and the kind of father I'm striving to be. Looking at my children, looking at how they act, looking at how they respond to conflict, looking at how they handle adversity, I can only look at myself in the mirror when I see one of them doing something that I wouldn't necessarily consider ideal and say, I gotta fix that. The pandemic over the last year has taught me that we're not perfect. And it has shown me that no matter how much I try to be the best father, kids are going to see things the way they want to see things. You know, I often look back and I realize that my children now, they often tell me that I'm wrong about things that I know I'm right about. But then I realize, hey, when I was a child, when I was their age, I told my parents the same thing. Now that I'm realizing that my parents are right, my own children are telling me that I'm wrong. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's necessary because it brings things back to me knowing that they're children. You know what I mean? And they're teenagers, and they're gonna test the water. They're gonna see if it's hot. They're gonna do things to see how the parents are gonna react. And myself and my wife, you know, we often struggle with, should we be harder on them? During the pandemic, it's just not much for them to do. And maybe, who knows, maybe during this time they'll, get closer to their end goal as far as what they want to be, what they want to do in their adult lives. What I'm noticing right now is that there are things that they just don't understand. Like my son is like, yo, or I want to go somewhere, can I go to my friends? Can my friends come over? And I'm like, yo, we're in the pandemic, man. It's just not the responsible thing to do. We want to make sure that everybody here is here next year around this time. You know, my mother is 60 years old and, she's high risk, obviously. And so we don't see them as much as we used to, her as much as I used to, because it's just not the responsible thing to do. I would admit, I totally understand why divorce is going up. I totally understand why suicide's going up. I totally understand why depression is at an all-time high, because, it's wild out here. Like I listen to my friends talk, I listen to people on social media talk, and I realize that, man, people are not faring well during this pandemic. And I got my family over here. We're doing okay. We're not on top of each other 24/7. And I try to tell my kids, like, go outside, you know what I'm saying? Go meet new friends. But then they're like, hey, well, you said we were in a pandemic. Why would I go outside? So it comes back to bite me, even though I know that, realistically, they could go outside and meet new friends and still be safe. Because at this point, I try to get them what they ask for because they're good kids. but then that's not enough. I try to talk to him, try to get him the game that I wasn't given, but I talk too much. So it's a lose-lose for me, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to find a balance, because a lot of the gems that I try to give my children, I didn't receive. You know, if you listen to any of my most recent podcasts, you will know that I don't know my biological father. You know what I'm saying? I don't know him. So a lot of the game I got came from my uncles. You know, and their game was, hey, get as many girls as you can, because that's manhood. So I don't want to plant that inside my son, because I know that's a toxic mindset, right? So I'm trying to give them the conversations that I didn't have. I'm trying to give them the words of wisdom that I didn't have. But I see that to them, it's like, we know, but Dad, we're going to make mistakes. You got to understand we're not perfect. And I'm like, yo, I understand you're not perfect, but I'm trying to stop y'all from making very catastrophic mistakes. I know you're going to make mistakes, but I want y'all to not make huge mistakes that's going to affect your adult life. Because most of my friends did. Most of my friends had children very early. Most of my friends started using drugs, marijuana very early. Most of my friends, decided they didn't want to go to school very early. These are things and most of my friends did not have a father around. And so, because my children have me and my wife, and we're building a stable foundation, I try to make sure that they understand that they got me. I'm always here. I mean, I even ask my children, like, how can I be a better father? What are some things that I can do different? How can I help you? Because I'm not perfect. And I think far too often as parents, especially as fathers, man, we think that being stern and being strict is the only way to parent. And it does work. But I do believe that if our children know that my dad listens, he cares about what I have to say, I think they're more apt to coming to us and saying, hey, I got something I want to talk to you about. Now, that's not saying teenagers are not going to be teenagers, because I know they're going to do some things that's going to turn me all the way gray. However, if those things are minimal, then I think it's a win-win. This is a podcast series I'm gonna do called The Science of Black Fatherhood. I would love to have guests. I would love to talk to fathers who've done this, who are 20 years in, 30 years in, 40 years in, who's 1 year in, and they're trying to figure it out like me, or they got advice to give to younger brothers like myself on how to best guide our children through society. Because I tell my son all the time, the world outside is cruel. I want to prepare y'all for that. And then one day I'm not going to be here. Your mom's not going to be here. And I want to instill those foundations, those values in you, so when I'm not around, you have something to think back to and say, here's what my parents would have wanted me to do. So here's what I'm going to do. It's going to be a new concept. This is going to be more of a podcast network. So please like, subscribe, share the podcast with your family, your friends. So follow the page on YouTube, follow the page on Instagram and on Twitter. And until next time, y'all be good.